My name's Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
And my name's Tom Scholey.
And we have issue 2, Preludes and Nocturnes, Neil Gaiman's Sandman comic. 1989. We still have Sam Keith, Mike D artwork. We're not quite sure exactly where the divisions of labor are. You could see a Sam Keith drawing pop up. You could see a Mike D drawing come up in this thing, man. This is what you were saying in the earlier episode. We're getting into Alan Moore territory here. In Alan Moore's series, he kind of like fleshed out and gave a little bit more character to Cain and Abel, the keepers of the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets, whenever Moore did that one origin story where they reprinted the Bernie Wrightson story and then get out of it that way, man. So that's something that Gaiman is playing around with here. And he's being a real smarty pants too, because he's pulling a lot of old DC canon and adding it into this baby, man. So he's very well read on these DC books, which is pretty fun.
Well, I feel like that first issue that we previously reviewed, we're in Neil Gaiman land. There's like maybe one or two like little DC things, the Sandman himself, Wesley Dodds. But it was like sort of whole cloth. We're in this like very new thing that Neil Gaiman's created. Issue 2, it feels like, I ran out. Like I shot my load. The whole story, that I had planned. Now it's next month came up real fast, and I got to come up with the next story. So it's like, let me look around at what's there, and it's like, this is a DC horror book. So he's like pulling from the horror corner of the DC universe, which Alan Moore had recently like reinvigorated, and then he's looking around. Batman shows up, but this is where he's kind of he's pulling things in as opposed to like bringing things from the outside. This is definitely a very different issue than the previous one, where the previous one stands on its own, where this one is very tied to DC or a particular brand of DC universe.
Yeah, highly imaginative. We're pretty much 100% in Slumberland here, man. And it doesn't look pretty after Morpheus has been gone for about 70, 80 years.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about those two hosts, Cain and Abel, there were, they were like the horror hosts of House of Secrets and House of Mystery. They were like the crypt keepers of the thing. In
this, they are like R2-D2-C3PO of Gaiman's Sandman. They're these kind of like comic follies. They love each other, they hate, but they battle and get under each other's skin and all that stuff. And I wonder if before Moore, like, was that the dynamic of those characters? Is that something that Moore brought to the table?
The characters prior to Moore had no existence other than here's this spine-chilling tale. No, he and Moore brought in the tying them explicitly to Cain and Abel. That these are the characters from the first story.
Yeah.
And one of them is the victim, and one of them is the aggressor, the villain or the murderer of the first story that man ever told itself.
And of course, these stories are, in effect, dreams, in a way.
Yeah.
So we are in Dreamland, Slumberland, whatever, and Morpheus needs to get home. He's been away for far too long. He's weak. He needs to build strength, and it's a long journey. So a gargoyle finds him along the way, brings him to the House of Mysteries or Secrets. Take your pick, whichever. He needs any physical material that he's ever touched, basically, to like just build some lean tissue.
He like when he's dragged in by that gargoyle, it's like so undignified for a character where, if you're familiar with this series, he's so like regal and so conscious of like how he comes across. It's like a really undignified, like it was kind of jarring to see him just being dragged, but it shows you how far he's fallen, like how what a weakened state he's in. And he just needs anything that, so he asks Cain and Abel if they still have the letters of commission that he gave them, because they have his signature, and there's a little bit of his magic, a little bit of his life force in that signature. So if you could just give them to me, I could kind of energize a little bit.
One of the big mistakes he made during his early tenure as the god of dreams was he put a little bit too much stake into these objects that he forged for his job. The helmet that we mentioned, the ruby amulet, and his little bag of sand. He needs to get hold of that stuff ASAP to get himself back to 100% tip-top condition.
And there's like a framing sequence in this story where it's Cain and Abel. They have their dynamic together, and Cain is the abuser, the murderer, and Abel is sort of the victim, the sort of schlub, the second banana, and he has Cain is giving Abel a birthday present, and Abel is terrified to open it because he's afraid there's going to be something horrible in there that's probably going to kill him. Maybe like a bear trap or something that like clamps on his head. Something horrible is in it, so I do not want to open it. And his brother kind of keeps teasing and sort of sneering. Open your birthday present. I swear, nothing bad's going to happen.
When we get into Wizard, we talk about Jeff Smith's Bone having some of those qualities where it's like, if you wanted a certain kind of comic or if you wanted something different, this was it. Sandman probably fits that bill, 2-3 years earlier.
And eventually you do see the influence that Sandman has on, like with Spawn, it's like, I want to do something like that, so that's like McFarlane's way of doing that sort of thing.
As we continue in Preludes and Nocturnes, we're not going to get to it in this recording session, but I think it's issue 5. There is a guy bound in chains hanging from a ceiling, not unlike Billy Kincaid in Spawn number 5. Dream takes a look at his castle, at his home, and it is a shambles. And Lucian, his kind of librarian of the House of Dreams,
His Alfred
is just it's kind of like cleaning up the mess, doing his best to kind of like maintain the premises, but it just cannot. It's falling into shambles without Dream there.
It's Grey Gardens.
And Brute and Glob, they don't know where those characters are, so that's like from the Kirby Sandman. And then that's more fodder for future stories. Yeah. This is the point where Sandman has to talk to those 3 fates. Am I right?
Yes.
And those characters come from The Witching Hour, number 1, Alex Toth. And when you look at the blonde girl, they kind of draw her with like the best kind of like Tothish approximation. I believe, I thought those characters were created either for this comic or were a part of like some grand mythology in the real world. But then I believe it's the Billy Ireland had a couple Witching Hour pages by Toth, and I'm like, oh, so that's where he got it. Super cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Gaiman does do a good job of like you not knowing where like actual folklore ends
he
and
blends
DC
it all together.
begins.
Right.
Yeah.
He blends it all together, man. And you know what? Like he recently put this book out, probably his newest work as of our recording, called Norse Mythology. And Norse Mythology, as far as I know, it was never like, there's not like a tome that this stuff came in. Little bits from this part of Scandinavia, little parts from here. And he created like
a unifying narrative.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so he's taking, like, this is what he does. You in the earlier episode you were mentioning, he's a writer, and he's been writing, but he's also a reader, a massive reader. And all of that is a part of this series, man, because it's like we're going to pull from Winsor McCay, we're going to pull from Lewis Carroll, and those are the big names. There's probably so much stuff that we just are not getting.
Yeah, of course.
And he buttresses all of it with like Greek mythology. He talks about the gates of horn and ivory, where it's Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams. You'd get a dream if it came through the gate of horn, it would be a false dream. It would all be lies. If it came through the gates of ivory, it would be a prophetic dream, a true dream. So he's like, that's the base that he's like laying all this stuff on it, and sort of when in doubt, sort of leans on that. So then that's when we get the 3 fates.
He needs the helm. He needs the pouch full of sand, and he needs his ruby amulet. So he poses those questions to these women. He asks not quite the perfect questions to the ladies, but we get some general idea. John Constantine pops up, and he was the last owner of the pouch, as far as they know. The amulet was in the hands, taken from the other guy who was in the order with Roderick Burgess, who skedaddled from town and ran to America with Burgess's mistress. And I think when we see that amulet in modern day, in this issue, the old lady who's going to see her son, Dr. Destiny, I think that's the mistress.
Yeah, I thought so too.
That's what I thought too. And and they show like around the time of the 3 fates coming there, they cut to a moment with her visiting the son in Arkham Asylum, another DC thing, and his name's John Dee, which is like in sort of those like mystical circles of like an Aleister Crowley. That's like the idol of all those. Like John Dee was like Queen Elizabeth's magician and scientist. You know, and he's the guy everybody wants. He's who Aleister Crowley wants to be. He tried to he tried to commune with angels. He wanted to learn the language of creation, so he could like recreate the universe. All this kind of like Moore's way into him, Gaiman's way into him, and she has a picture of her son, young John Dee. This is my son. He's at your asylum. I want to see him, and he's handsome. And then on the opposite spread, you see what he is now, and in his cell, and he's like one of those like rotten apple sculpture faces. He's just like straight out of like a Tales from the Crypt kind of comic. This like zombie looking thing.
And the helmet was traded to a demon that we don't know, man. So with these little bits of information that Morpheus gets, he has to make a decision of where to go first, man. So he thinks about the amulet, and he's like, well, I don't know about this Justice League of America, man. That's a lot of people, and I'm a little bit weak. He thinks about the helmet, and he's like, taking on the entirety of Hell's forces, probably not a smart move. But this Constantine guy, he's just a punk-ass human. Go there first.
It kind of reminds me, like, this is the video game. He's got to go find his, like, little... And it's like Mega Man, where it's like, which order do you take the villains on so you can use the one thing to help you conquer the next thing, to help you level up and conquer the next thing.
Yeah, totally. So once he decides on his plan of attack, John Constantine, that's pretty much where this issue lets off.
Yeah, and then we come back to the bookend, where it's time for Abel to open his gift. And he opens his gift, and it's a baby gargoyle, and he wants to name it Irving. And Cain gets in a murderous rage. You idiot! How could you name a gargoyle Irving? Everybody knows a gargoyle's name has to start with a G. And you can see him like start to and get to the point of murder, where they make it clear that this murder is reenacted continually, just like how stories are told and retold. The murder, Cain murdering Abel, gets reenacted over and over again. Cain, like in a moment of vulnerability, he kind of admits that things haven't been the same since Dream disappeared. Like the world's kind of like lost its magic, which I feel like that's one of the things that this book kind of explains. It's like it seems like there's been magic all through human history, and then for some reason in our lifetime in the 20th century, I don't see any magic. Where'd the magic go? So the whole thing of Dream being imprisoned, the Lord of Stories being imprisoned, that's the explanation for why the 20th century had no magic. And now magic is coming back to the 20th century. And that's why our dreams used to be so lush and wonderful in the old days. All these great grand stories, and now it's all like Dilbert and The Office, and like these like very like rigid, boring, soulless, modern kind of stories. And so Cain he feels this, and he's like, I don't want to murder you. And I find that I haven't been murdering you as much as often. It's this very abusive relationship, and the kind of like talk that goes on. And then Abel names the gargoyle Irving, and fuck all that. Like, you gotta die now. And so he kills him. He kills him. And then, by the a couple of the other things that we've described happen in the story, and then we come back to that, and we find out that this is a cycle that's reenacted, and with a lot of pain, Abel like always wakes up from it. He kind of comes back to life. It's very painful, very uncomfortable.
Like Wolverine's healing factor.
Yeah, and he's got this sort of like zombie-ness that kind of the healing factor takes a while to like get him back to 100%. And it's a really poignant moment. He's like really sad, sitting there with the gargoyle, who he's renamed, with the word starting with G. I forget what the name is of the that he gave him, but he gives him a new name, and he's explaining to this gargoyle.
He's telling him a story, and it's a story about two brothers that get along and love each other and never kill each other. And
it's really sad because this is what he wants. He just wants his brother to love him, and it's just that's not the story that he's in.
Sandman needs to get his stuff back, and we'll explore those in episode 3. So we're gonna get back to making our comics. But you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon, and it'll let you know whenever we have new videos available.
You can find Cartoonist Kayfabe merch at our spread shop. There's a link below the video.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Sholey, or on Instagram at Tom_Sholey.
You guys know what your marching orders are.
Read more comics.